the work will change you. The work will change who you are, because you will build mental fortitude around managing problems, managing money, around wealth building, around what you learn when you invest in property. And growth comes when there's an element of discomfort. We're going to talk about that a little bit later.
You're listening to Property Investor Tales, stories from the front yard.
My name's Tabitha Bright, Head of Coaching and Advising Team here at Positive Real Estate, where we teach people, how to invest in property and how to do it well and how to do it safely and get a great result. And I've been coaching for over 16 years now, at 17 in February. So very proud of that milestone. And during that time, I've seen people from all walks of life, and then doing this podcast, these episodes, I've shared and interviewing 99 different people on different topics. There's 99 episodes. It's probably actually 98 people, because I think one episode I did a solo one like this. and occasionally it does require a solo conversation. And so today's conversation is, over that time, the lessons gleaned, because as most people out there on the internet that coach, educate, teach self-development, all of that stuff, they'll always say that there are commonalities in all of our behaviours that lay clues to what success looks like. And so today I want to talk about how to not sabotage your future, because there are some key components to people investing successfully that I see along the journey for clients over the last 16 years and 98 podcast episodes. So I've got here 99 interviews. I'd forgotten about the one that I did on my own, so we'll just gloss over that. And I'd call it 99, 98 interviews. The number one podcast lesson that I think for any of you that have been following the podcast would be that people always say they wish that they had started earlier. Our youngest client that has purchased a property was 18 that I know of. And he's done incredibly well. You will have seen me interview him. His name's Liam. He's in a previous podcast. And he bought a property and did really well out of it, and he's busy saving for his second property. And then, from the people that start a bit later in life, and here's the thing, it's never too late to start. I put a caveat on that. Obviously, if you're 90 and thinking about starting property investing, we may have some issues getting lending. But for the most part, even if you're in your 40s and 50s, sometimes even one property can make a massive difference to the outcome. It might be legacy for you that you want to leave for your children. It might be making sure that at 70 you have resources. There's no get-rich-quick scheme that I've ever discovered. Sometimes people make quick profit. Most of the time, there's a luck component to that. The market was timed correctly. Not always, but for the most part, there's no get-rich-quick scheme. Otherwise, I think you'd see a lot of us a lot wealthier. The next, so here's my cat that's jumped up. The next podcast lesson that has been prevalent is lesson number 2, don't sell. And we always know that Jason Witten, the founder of Positive Real Estate, he says, buy well, never sell, unless you're selling strategically. So we might talk a little bit about that. Sometimes it can pay to sell, particularly if you've got a property that is underperforming, and due to your understanding of the market when you purchased it, it may never quite perform or do what you want it to do. So sometimes, in conjunction with your coach and getting some good, solid advice, our clients will sell a property I'm doing it myself right now, but I'm about to trade up. So I'm selling a property that's done its thing. It's probably reached its zenith for now. Could I trade it for something that will then perform better long term, that I'm going to hold, until probably I die? And the answer for me was yes. So occasionally we may choose to have a migration of money strategy where we upgrade and we migrate our money into a better class of property. That's the caveat once again. For the most part, don't sell. I've never met many clients that have held property for 20 years and then said, actually I don't like this property. When we've held property for that long, it's had a couple of cycles in the market and the rents will have gone up substantially if it's a good quality property, and it'll be positive cash flow, and your debt will probably be minimal on it, certainly compared to the value, even if you haven't paid anything off. So don't sell is another big podcast lesson, because there have been plenty of people that have sold property and they might have made a profit. And I'm looking at myself going, I'm selling a property. But they've made profit, but then they didn't necessarily replace it with something else, or they went overseas and did a big trip, or they built their principal place of residence, but then never, ever continued the investing journey. And so it's that thing about, if you're going to sell, you have to do it strategically, and you have to be improving your situation, not just cashing it in and having money in the bank, because we all know what that's worth. It goes backwards very fast. It doesn't keep pace with inflation. So the overwhelming lesson is start early, or as early as you can, and don't sell unless you're selling strategically. The next lesson is that property investing is the long-term storage of wealth. It is not short-term gain. It is not short-term cash flow, and you cannot reap and sow in the same season. It is time in the market, not timing the market. And these are lessons when we're in acquisition phase. We can't time the market. We can certainly get lots of good quality data and have an understanding on what's driving the market, what's fueling the market, what the market is likely to do. But it is rare for us to be able to time it and say the property market is going to go up in value and it's going to do this on December 2024. I mean, even trying to get a correct prediction on interest rates is hard enough, let alone the property market, with all of the different levers that get pulled that affect the property market, or any market for that matter. So we can't time the market, but we need to have time in the market. And so we buy the best we can afford at the time we're buying for our situation, and then we plan to hold, or we plan to add value in some way. You might have a renovation strategy, you might have a subdivision strategy. There's lots of different ways to make money in the market, but there's equally nothing wrong with having a more passive approach in which you're buying good quality real estate and holding. Often I've found the trickier deals I've done, where I've tried to force value and renovate and done all this stuff, if you add up all the costs and the time spent and the overruns, the stuff that you're not expecting, a lot of the time the profit that you're making is not that massive compared to buying something good quality and just holding. And I think people don't always like hearing that, because there's a part of our ego that gets attached to creating something. And it's very hard to be passive and patient, and I get that. But we have to remember, property investing is the long-term storage of wealth. It's not short-term gain. And people come into property investing expecting to make 100K in their first 12 months, or for it to go up in value quickly. For the rents, people are often chasing positive cash flow property. For the most part, in the Australian market, that is something that happens over time. It's not something that you get to experience immediately. Certainly now that interest rates are back to a more normal interest rate around that sort of 6-7%, which is standard for Australia. and it's not what a lot of people have experienced if you've bought property in the last 4 years. For new investors, it is not making sense to them that they could get 2% interest rates and now they're on 6%, and the rental yield is only 4%. But that is pretty standard for the Australian market, historically speaking, and is looking like it's probably going to continue. So does that then stop you buying property? It can't. But you can't bank on cash flow in the short term. Cash flow is the reward for paying down debt and holding property and increasing your rents over time, because it is a long-term proposition. Now, are there creative strategies out there? Student accommodation, you name it. There can be all sorts of different cash flow strategies, but they often affect the capital growth of the property. Not always, but often. So once again, keep it simple is also something that I'd add to this lesson. Keep it simple, because simple is often the hardest thing to do. And don't overcomplicate it, and do the time. Because when we want a quick result, we want to take a diet pill, not eat well. We want the 6-pack of abs, we want the beach body, but we don't want to do the work. The work will change you. The work will change who you are, because you will build mental fortitude around managing problems, managing money, around wealth building, around what you learn when you invest in property. And growth comes when there's an element of discomfort. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So this is an old classic, right? I know you guys will have seen this before, but I love this because it's true. It's a cliche for a reason. So success, what people think it is. Success, what it really is. And that is absolutely true. There is no shortcut to success. And what we aim to do is to untangle some of this mess. So here at Positive Real Estate, obviously, we run our coaching and mentoring program. Our Portfolio Builder Lifetime Mentoring program is the one that I head up and run with the team. And we aim to untangle some of this stuff for you so that you're not having to learn by trial and error, but it doesn't change the fact that there'll be normal problems. Tenant that doesn't pay, or a leak, a waterproofing issue, or a market goes sideways and there's a bit of an oversupply in your area in apartments, and that means that your rent goes down. Like, all of those are normal cyclical challenges that we have, and we have to learn to manage. So success can be a little bit messy, but we have to stick it out and do that time in the market. So there's 3 phases to building a portfolio. There's your acquisition phase, there's your consolidation phase, and there's your lifestyle phase. Now, acquisition phase is why most people join our coaching program, our portfolio builder, because they are keen to build a portfolio. They're keen to have investment properties that are going to create long-term financial security and wealth for them, give them options, which is awesome. The acquisition phase, even if it's uncomfortable, a little bit scary, and there's, should I buy this property, shouldn't I? And we go through the whole coaching process, it still feels like you're doing something. You're setting goals, you're out there doing stuff, you're buying something. There's that dopamine hit, right? Consolidation phase is where most of the challenges come up. And consolidation phase is all about reducing debt, increasing your cash flow with your rental increases, lowering your LVR, so lowering your debt down to that 50 to 70%, so that you're no longer having the cash flow burden that you might have in acquisition phase. It's beginning to ease now because your rents are going up and your debt's going down. But people also get very frustrated at this period of time because they might have 3 properties and they've hit a servicing ceiling and they can't buy the 4th they need. They might be feeling frustrated that they've held a property for 7 years, but it hasn't necessarily jumped up in value. And so consolidation phase is what we're going to talk about today, because consolidation phase is where most people stuff themselves up, because the passive income journey is 15 years minimum. And before we can hit lifestyle, we have to go through consolidation phase. And this is where Jason, Sam, myself, we say to clients, it's time to get a hobby. You just have to leave your properties alone. Check in, make sure you're getting your annual rent increases. Check in to see if there's anything that will help with those increases. Does the property over time need a bit of a zhuzh up? Can you refinance and pay down your debt faster? Can you get a better interest rate? All of that stuff is consolidation phase. But you have to hold, even if you're feeling like the property isn't maybe doing what you want it to do, because property can be contrary. And I've held property for 9 years and it's barely gone up in value. And over 9 years, it might have gone up 100K. And I've gone, oh my God, I've got this dud property. And then all of a sudden, something in the market changes and the property just goes absolutely nuts. And it can be in a very short, compressed time that a property doubles in value. But if I'd not held the line and I'd got wobbly, I might have sold that property and missed out on all that growth, but had all the pain of holding it for 9 years. And I've got some examples to illustrate this stuff. So once and excuse the analogy, but I thought a good analogy was like a long-term relationship, because once the excitement is over of acquisitions phase, the dopamine hit has diminished and consolidation sets in. So it's not the Bucks party and honeymoon and Mykonos for acquisitions as an example. Consolidation phase is the long-term relationship and marriage/commitment. And so you have to stay the distance and not get the 7-year itch that we talk about. Because then you get to be the happy empty nesters riding the Harleys into the sunset when you hit lifestyle phase. But if you don't go through that long-term relationship working out stuff, then you don't get to do the lifestyle stuff either. And this is what's so important for people to understand. You have to hold the line. I'm thinking of that song, Toto, Hold the Line. Play it to yourself in consolidation phase. And so if we still continue along the vein of likening it to marriages, estimates say that 41% of marriages will end in divorce, and as many as 60% of second marriages don't make it, and third marriages end in divorce 73% of the time. And this does, you might say, well, what the hell's that's got to do with property? But it does, because sometimes I see people having a crack at property for a second time or a third time, depending on their life circumstances. And the longer you leave it, it's more and more like a third marriage, where you start taking greater risks with property and the type of property you buy, the less time you perceive you have in the market. And I would hazard a guess that that's kind of what's happening with marriages. The less time you perceive, you're marriageable on the market, then the more that you'll just take a punt rather than focus on maybe the right person. I don't know. I'm just drawing conclusions here. You can't, there's no proof behind this, but I thought it was a good analogy. The average lifespan of a first marriage before divorce is around 8 years. And once again, an interesting kind of comparison, because RP Data CoreLogic, who track the property market, have a stat that is across the country, homes that resold at a loss have an average length of ownership between 6 to 8 years, which is kind of like the whole divorce thing, right? People last uncomfortable, bored, annoyed for around that 7, 8 years. It's the same with property. They get bored at around that 6, 7, 8 years, and they go, this isn't serving me anymore. Can't be bothered doing the hard yards. Going to sell it, and I need to go back into the market and buy something else. But now I've only got this amount of time, so I'm just going to buy something quickly, or I'll start looking for something with high cash flow or high returns. The higher the return, the higher the risk, folks. And this is where people start to have some challenges with property. Interestingly, across all sales recorded, a gross profit in property meant that the average length of ownership was recorded at 10 years, while homes which sold for more than double their previous purchase price were owned for an average of 16.8 years. And so this is why we say that your journey from acquisitions to lifestyle stage is 15 years, because we aim to outperform the market, is 15 years conservatively. And I think that's a fair setting of expectation. But can we knock off, call it off 17 years? Can we knock off a couple of years, maybe even longer, by buying well, having a debt reduction strategy with your coach, and being educated on how to make the most out of your portfolio and your money management? 100% we can absolutely outperform the averages on that. And so I like those two analogies. It was being a little bit silly, but it kind of not proved my point, but it illustrated my point. So I'm just doing the same thing here. So the sinking ships of self-sabotage. It's a good alliteration, that one, isn't it? So this is where people come undone. Fear. What if interest rates keep increasing or the market goes backwards? China stops buying iron. There's all this what we call the what ifs. Broken trust. So what if I bought the wrong thing? It hasn't done anything in 2-3 years. Shouldn't it be doing something? High expectations. Hasn't done anything yet. Comparison. Well, their property went up 100K and mine has done nothing. These things are the 4 key challenges around mindset that we see when we're coaching people, because are you capable? Are you emotionally secure enough to hold your property portfolio 15 years plus through different markets, different lifestyle stages that you will have, boredom, stagnant results, price adjustments, tenant frustrations, and everything that comes with property? Where do you go under pressure, and what behavior do you exhibit that sabotages your results? And I want you guys to think about this, because we all have challenges with how we deal with challenges. I go to overwhelm. When I have a lot on my plate, I go to overwhelm, and it's just like everything's too hard. I don't want to know. And I've learned some strategies, because I've had to, in order to have a successful portfolio and do the work I love doing, which is demanding, and have a life outside of that and stay healthy and fit. So I've had to work out some strategies around chunking down and quantifying what is urgent, what is important, and what is urgent and important, what needs my attention, and if I do this thing, is it going to get me further towards my goal? And you have to be strict with your boundaries on this stuff, because if less than 1%, it's well under 1%. I think it's 0.069% of Australians actually hold 5 or more properties, but we call it the 1% club of clients that have 3 or more investment properties. If you're in the 1% of Australia, you're doing something different to everybody else. And if you're going to hold those properties, once again, you're going to be doing something different to everybody else. And I want you to think about, when you're stressed, when you're under pressure, what sabotages you in your behavior. So if you were to get no growth in the first few years, where do you go? Do you go to self-doubt? Do you go to reevaluation? And always ask, and I find this question really helpful, is it the property or the market, or is it me? And sometimes you won't know the answer to that question, and this is where coaching is super, super important. whether it's Positive Real Estate, I mean, obviously we'd love to, if you're not already being coached here at Positive Real Estate, we'd love to coach you. But whether it's Positive Real Estate or not, I'm a big advocate of coaching around the things that we can't see, our blind spots, our scotomas, because it can stop you from falling prey to patterns of behavior that undo you. And super, super important that you're very aware and you get curious. So sometimes people will go to anger rather than self-doubt. I use self-doubt as an example here. Sometimes people get angry. Anger gives us certainty. And I say to people, don't get angry, get curious. Like, ask some questions. Why am I angry about this? What am I disappointed in? When I bought this property, what was I aiming to achieve? Is it true that it hasn't achieved that? If not, why not? Am I expecting too much from this property because I've only held it 3 years or 7 years, and I know that when I bought it, I need to hold it 15 years or 10 years? Have a look at what quality questions can you ask, and then put your hand up and get help. Because it might be that, look, it does happen. People do buy duds. I've bought duds myself. And why I chose to get coaching, because I was a client of Positive Real Estate back in the very early days, why I chose to get coaching was because I was sick of learning by trial and error. Because that's one thing that will certainly increase the time frame of your investing journey, is if you have to make the mistakes that you can avoid with coaching. And I think that's a really worthy point. So this was an example of a client. This is from quite a while ago. We're talking in 2000, maybe 17, I think, but when they sent this email. So it's an old email. And it says, Happy New Year, I hope this finds you well. Now, you guys can all read this. This person was a bit concerned about their properties. And they've had a valuation from Heron Todd White on their house and land in Wellington Point, which is 22k from Brisbane CBD. Now, at the time, around 3.5 years ago, so it would be, we're now talking 2017, 2018, the client bought in 2014 for $548. 3 years later, it's worth $570. Now, this person is upset because there's been negligible capital gain. Now, we don't control when the market, and I don't mean we as in Positive Real Estate, I mean we as in any investor, doesn't control when the market performs. It can be contrary, like I said before. Sometimes it can have everything stacked in its favour and just not move. The Brisbane market actually did that for 10 years. We got into the Brisbane market in as early as actually 2012, because everybody from government to the best demographers to the best people that do statistics, I can't get that word out, and market commentators, all of the stats and data said that Brisbane was ready to boom based on supply, based on infrastructure, government spend, population, all that stuff. And it was contrary and it did nothing. Then we had the Brisbane floods, totally out of anyone's control. Even though they only affected 1% of the market, we've probably all forgotten about them, they massively impacted the mentality of the Brisbane market. So here's the thing. This person, I believe, went on to actually sell this property. Now, if they had sold today, they would have made a $377,000 capital gain. But because they had a bit of a meltdown and freak out, they actually sold after purchasing for $555,000, which is super sad. And then this person that bought it off them and then resold has missed out also on some other more capital gain, literally 12 months, 6 months later. And this thing about this turnover of selling, you've got to just be so careful when you start to lose your nerve and you don't hold, because this person actually sold within that 6-year time frame. You can see here they sold in 2020. So they bought it in 2014. They reached out to the coach who got them to hold it, but they wavered and they sold it 6 years later. So exactly like RP data and the marriage statistics show us, 6 years you're bound to make a loss. They didn't make a loss, but they certainly did, well, they might have on pay, I guess, after you've taken into account buying and selling costs. But if they'd just stayed the line and held for 3 more years, they would have made nearly $400,000. And that's the craziness in this. And this is where investors undo themselves, because they just lose their nerve. And this property here in Hemmant in Queensland, this is a client that purchased at 540 that is held and is now worth 1.06 million. So this is where it's awesome to see a client in a similar market at a similar time hold. Now, this price here is just the land price. They actually purchased at 540 when we take into account the build. But this person has sat and held over that same time frame, and that property is now worth 1 million, which is pretty cool. This person here sold in February 2023 and missed out on 200K in 12 to 18 months. So this is one that held, this is one that sold. And you can see in literally in 12 to 18 months, the uplift sometimes when the market's on the go, it goes. And I can't state it enough how important it is to make sure that you are holding. And if you're worried about it, if you're concerned about your portfolio's performance, book in with your coach and make sure you understand where the market's at, what's driving it, because there's all sorts of data that we can tap into, from vacancy rates to supply and demand to microburbs to remembering why we bought this property in the first place and what we want it to do for us long term, and going through the fundamentals of our purchase that give us that ability to continue to hold the line and stay. So this client held the property 9 years. So they purchased for 354 and sold for 420,000. It was resold by the next buyer 12 months later for 545. So that buyer has unwittingly timed the market and, made 100 odd K. Evaluation 3 months later shows an uplift of a further 15,000. So it literally in 3 months, that property's gone up 15 grand. So in another 6 years, if the original purchaser had held this property, in another 6 years, it'll be worth around, 700,000. And that property has done its job of doubling in value. It's currently renting at 8% on the original purchase price, which is heading into neutral cash flow, which is fantastic because it's no longer beginning to cost you. So now you can hold it. And once again, it's an example of people getting frustrated and bored. They've made a small profit and they go, stuff it, I'm going to sell it. I can't be bothered with this stuff. It's hard, it's boring. Tenants are a pain in the butt. It hasn't jumped in value like I was hoping, because we can have these unspoken expectations around property. And I bring you back to that quote about sowing and reaping in the same year. We know this logically, but then emotionally, we can struggle to see it through. So invest in your EQ is one of my biggest tips for the holding of investment property, because for the most part, your success as an investor is not what you buy at the beginning, because if you have the main tenets of buying well, buying the best you can afford to, and buying in a major capital city for the most part, and is close to an economic hub, you will, if you hold that property for 20 years, do exceptionally well. What undoes, I would bet 90% of property investors, is selling too soon. This is another example. So this is what Sam calls his Rule 72. So out of the 23 people who bought in this development at Positive Real Estate, 7 are left holding. And that's about 30%. And they purchased in 2009 for $548,000, and those properties are now worth around 1.1 up to a high range of 1.3. And the rent is around $1,000 a week. So if you purchased at 548 back in 2009, you guys can do the maths on how many years that is. We'll call it 2010, that's what, 14, so 15 years. So this is exactly 15 years. They purchased 15 years ago. That property has doubled in value, and the rents are now, so you would have paid off, I would imagine, a chunk of debt on that property, because probably your mortgage has gone to principal and interest. So you might have a mortgage of around $300,000, renting at $1,000 a week. Like, you guys do the maths. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me. But you have to have held through the uncomfortable and boring bit. And this is where, like I have said, we fail. So understanding how we self-sabotage is a tool we like to use at Positive Real Estate. We use it with our teams and we use it with our clients. So I would encourage everybody to take the saboteur assessment. Hop online, and we have no connection to these guys. This is just simply a tool we like to use. It's also the guy that designed this also has a TED talk about it. You can look up the positive saboteurs, positive intelligence saboteurs, and his TED Talk's on his website because he talked about why people self-sabotage. And this is just an example of the kind of behaviours that the results will show you. So an anonymous person, it's not me because I am a hyperachiever, controller, restless. They're my top 3 saboteurs. So we always like to look at what are your top 3 because they're your key components of behaviour where you go under pressure. For this person, they're stickler, hyperachiever, hyperrational. And so if they're a stickler, they might get really stuck on, but you said, or but the rules are, or this should have. There'll be a lot of should have language. And I'm using this as an example because when you take the saboteur assessment, it's free, I believe. It will also give you examples of how that behaviour supports your success and how that behaviour undoes your success, because there's always the yin and yang. It's never just one thing. It's always the black and the white. And understanding that, I think, can really help you manage how you behave under pressure when things get a little bit tough. Because Jason always says, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's true. I think consolidation phase is definitely the marathon. And when you're during your consolidation phase, make sure that you focus on your goals and strategies. Don't compare. Comparison is the thief of joy. We know that. Go back to the fundamentals of why you bought the property. Take control of your cash flow, because often people aren't managing their rents and their increases properly. They're property managers. Know the difference between a calculated risk and a risky situation. So just because your property hasn't gone up in value doesn't mean that it's risky. It just means that you're taking a calculated risk based on what you understand of the property market, and it's doing what it should be for now. Meet with your coach. They can take you through all of this stuff in detail. Make disappointments your strengths. What have you learned from all of this? What not to do next time? Build investor muscle on what is a normal problem and what deserves elevation and immediate action. And stay the line. Often, like we saw in some of those examples, it's darkest before dawn. Like all these cliched lines are cliched for a reason, and it's because they are common truths. Don't tinker, overthink it, sell it, and trade. Literally get a hobby, find something else to manage your time. And I'm not saying don't pay attention to your dollars and cents, because that is important. I am somebody that checks my bank accounts daily. I think that's really important. However, you can't check your property values daily. I would thoroughly recommend against that, because it is a long-term proposition. So get a hobby, and I've put rock climbing in there as an example, mainly because Jason's an avid rock climber and I'm an avid ultra runner. So the marathon, it's all coming together. I'm sure you guys can see it. So the hidden metric to your success is your EQ, your ability to manage your behavior under pressure. And if I Google what determines people's success in life, it comes up with this: building a growth mindset, improving your emotional intelligence, developing mental toughness, and strengthening your willpower. And a lot of the team, including myself, Jason, Sam, we all have hobbies that also do this for us, strengthening our mental toughness. I like to challenge myself. Jason's the same with his climbing. And I like to do it in my investing, but I like to do it in a controlled space where I understand my risk. And I like to constantly learn and build a growth mindset. And I like to question. Everything, which drives some people a little bit batty. But I think it's healthy, and I think it's good, and I think it helps you become a better investor. And emotional intelligence looks like this. It's about self-awareness. It's about social awareness, how you react and interact with people. It's about relationship management, how you influence, how you deal with conflict. And it's about self-management, your self-control, your adaptability, what you tell yourself, how much you can deal with stress, your sleep at night factor. And building these skills is not a passive thing. You have to go out and look to improve them. So I suggest that everybody does some self-improvement and get uncomfortable. My running coach says to me when I complain, I must admit I complain. That's what coaches are for sometimes. I have a bit of a whinge too. Don't tell the coaches I said that. Sometimes I'll say to my running coach, because I've got different coaches. Sorry, I've got to get hay fever. Makes me tickly throat. She goes, "Get uncomfortable, girl." So I'm like, geez, really? Do I want to do this? This is hard. Get uncomfortable, girl. So, sorry, hon. Sorry, guys. It'll settle in a second. Seek discomfort. Set a mistake budget. We have buffers for our clients. Ask for advice. Figure out who is your trusted team. And strive for excellence, but not perfection. Because perfection, as we know, is a myth, but we do get caught up in perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect, or you'd never take action. And perfection is one of those things where people do the crazy 8. They get caught in this loop. And it's very hard to take action. Sorry. Excuse me. It's very hard to take action if you're waiting for perfect, which we know. So comfort equals dead dreams. This is a favourite saying of mine because, and I put the old couch potato there, there's nothing wrong with liking relaxing. I'm a big fan of Rest is an important strategy when it comes to ultra running, funnily enough, because it allows your body to recover. So I don't think there's anything wrong with specific rest and relaxation. I think that's awesome. What you can't do is numb yourself. Numb yourself with TV, with doom scrolling. Get uncomfortable and build a portfolio, but it is not always going to be straightforward, and it is going to feel, I'm just going to use the word uncomfortable because that's the word that's coming to mind. It is going to feel uncomfortable at times. You are going to have to push through, but remember, you've got a team behind you. Because if the automatic acquisition plan is 4 properties, and this is at a very basic high level, 4 properties, you hold it 15 years, they double in value, you keep 2 and you sell 2, pay down the debt. You've now got 2 properties bringing you in the cash flow debt free. So that's the automatic acquisition plan to get yourself 100K. And then, and this is the maths here, the 3 million in assets, you need the 15 years for them to grow, becomes 6 million, and you sell half, keep half, and you've got that 150,000 in income, which is awesome. But it does require financial discipline, and it requires you holding property. So hence I keep coming back to this message, and I'm sorry if it's repetitive, but I really want people to understand how important being able to mentally hold property it is. So financial discipline can be a great thing to have a bit of fun with. And it might be as simple as training your brain to look for the positive, because our nervous systems, our brains are wired to look for danger. And so we give problems far more weight than we give good news. And so I'd like to challenge everyone to write down 3 good things about their property a week. So you're glad you got your rent? Awesome. Your budget's on track? Fantastic. I went to mentoring and I learned something? Awesome. Or I met with my coach, I learned something, or I got a $10 increase in my rent? Fantastic. You know, there will be heaps of stuff that you can train your brain to focus on the positive, and it will end up looking like and feeling like you're making progress. And when we're making progress, we feel happier and better about our situation. And it's not about glossing over challenges, but it's making sure that there is a more accurate balance around what's a challenge and what's success, and making sure your brain recognizes that, because it is wired to look for problems. So some other lessons that came out of the podcast, these are the common themes. Learn new things, educate yourself, build and invest in community, which I think we're tribal beasts, right? And it's one of the things that I know has helped a lot of clients is being part of a network of property investors. You know, there's the Facebook, there's some live events that we're bringing back now. We've got coffee clubs about to relaunch, bus tours, all of that cool stuff where you get to be belly to belly, as Sam Saggers say, with other people. So there's something about not being alone in a journey that is maybe a little bit scary at times when you're out of your comfort zone. That just really helps. Set uncomfortable goals that require you to stretch is really important. Hard, and build that investor muscle, build that self-esteem, learn about you. Don't sweat the small stuff. That takes practice, and take responsibility, because no one can do it for you. And when you own the responsibility, you also own the ability to change what's happening if you don't like what's happening. And that's what's so awesome about taking responsibility. So wrapping up, I wanted to just finish on a couple more quotes. If we're talking about owning it and taking responsibility, It's not that Positive Real Estate or your coach doesn't take responsibility, but it is important that when you go on an investing journey, you own it. It's your business. And one of my favorite quotes is, the results you seek are in the work you're avoiding. And for me, with my ultra running, I'll use that as an example, the results that I was seeking were being undermined by my nutrition. Once I changed that up, it fixed a lot of my results. And then it was that I wasn't doing as much work in the gym as I needed to do, because I don't like the gym. So I had to commit to going back into the gym in order to train to get the results I wanted with the ultra running. And it's the same with your investing. With my investing, where was I not getting a result? I was not getting a result because I was looking to do a complex property deal because I thought that that was going to get me a faster result. That was one of the lessons I learned. But if I just bought the best quality property I could buy across the road from me here in Melbourne, I would have outperformed the result I got doing the tricky stuff in a smaller town. So the results you seek are in the work that you're avoiding. I was actually avoiding simplifying stuff and not having to prop up my ego with a pretty story. I was wanting to feel special because I hadn't done some of the work around the self-esteem stuff. And I'm being completely frank and honest with you here. And that may not resonate for some of you, but it may resonate for others. Or maybe you haven't had that awareness yet that, you know, doing stuff like this is always multifaceted. There's always many layers to why we invest. You know, it's great being able to tell people that you're a successful property investor. It's great that you can tell a story where you've achieved something or done something or got a crazy result that no one else has done. You know, that's very intoxicating, rather than saying, oh yeah, I just bought something and held it forever. You know, it's like there's a kick, and I was chasing a kick. But when I simplified my strategy and I focused on what is the actual result I want, I don't actually want to just be able to talk at barbecues. I actually want a financial outcome. We totally changed our investing strategy and got a very different result. So the results you seek are in the work that you're avoiding. So have a bit of a think about that for me. And the other one that I really like, because I do like to be given a blunt feedback, don't be upset with the results you didn't get with the work you didn't do. So if you're not investing in yourself, if you're not investing in your education, if you're not coming to mentoring workshops, if you're not booking in with your coach, understanding where the market's at, being actively involved with your investing and your self-development, then don't be upset with the results you get. Because sometimes we can succeed by default because we just get too busy to sell a property, or we just get on with life, or we just buy one and that particular property gets an amazing result. That does happen, absolutely. But more often than not, people self-sabotage because they don't do the work. Do the work, my friends, because consolidation phase will undo you if you don't do the work. Take responsibility, get stuck in, learn some stuff, build who you are, because that's part of the magic of investing, is you get to progress and then you get to pass that on, because nothing is static, and we drop a penny in a pond and the ripples expand. And it's the same with your education. The stuff that you learn, you will pass on whether you're aware of it or not. A conversation with a colleague, teaching your children about money. We have so many clients that are now have children that are investing, because they learn to invest, and adult children are actually given free membership here at Positive Real Estate as part of a lifetime mentoring program, which is really cool. And because we've been around that 20 years plus, we're now seeing those adult children coming through and also getting on the investing journey, aka Liam, who bought his first property at 18, which is just awesome to see that impact. So when you do the work, when you get the results, when you learn stuff, when you upskill, when you become more emotionally intelligent, you have a massive impact on what happens around you, which then ripples out and ripples out. And I love to think of the positive, no pun intended, impact that all of us and our fabulous clients can have on people's positions financially, which then enables them to do so much more good. Awesome. And I think that is pretty much it. I'll finish on that note. Nothing that is worthwhile is ever easy. And that, my friends, is the podcast episode for today. That is the 100th episode. If you made it through to the end, thank you very much. There is a bit of repetition in there, but repetition, I think, is important when it's a very important lesson. And sometimes we need to hear things several times for it to sink in. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, 100th episode. Thank you for sticking with it. That's me for now. Adios. Hey, thanks for listening to Property Investor Tales. Remember to subscribe so you get notified every time a new episode drops. As you can guess, I love hearing people's property investor tales. So if you'd like to share yours, then please get in touch with me via email at propertyinvestortales@positivementor.com.au. We would also love your feedback, and I would appreciate a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Remember, you can watch all of these podcasts over on YouTube at Positive Mentor or at positivementor.com.au. Until then, take care, happy investing, and bye for now.